Hello, this is the TradeSite US Stocks, Futures, and Options preview for the week beginning Sunday, the 10th of March, 2010, ending Friday the 15th. This is options expiration. We already rolled our futures contracts to the June contracts at this point in time. That was Thursday going into Friday. So now all the main ES, NQ, Russell, Dow futures should be on the June contracts. And that's exciting. And then, of course, this next week is triple expiration, which means we don't have a Fed meeting because we already had one. So we've got, potential unraveling on Wednesday. Triple expiration unraveling are usually bigger than the others, 4 times a year. That'll be for Wednesday. And then on Friday, we've got expiration itself, which is usually a bust. And then we've got another 2 weeks before we get to the Easter weekend. Good Friday, the 29th of the month, is a holiday. So be prepared for that because that means the last day of the last trading day of the month is the 28th, Thursday, and then we print statements on the 31st, but that's a Sunday. So that's the calendar from here. We should have after this. So we have this week with the options expiration. The following week is clean. The following week is clean except for Friday is a holiday, and again with a long weekend, you never know. We're also entering the March Madness time of year, which means that a lot of times that slows the market down. And sometimes that slows the market down because you've got so many games going on and people traveling with a lot of money that are watching the games. So just be aware of that. But generally speaking, we should have. And this is usually a great time of year. It really is. And we had some great signals on Friday and some other stuff going on. So we'll see what happens. Here's a look at the dollar index daily chart. Dollar finally dipping a bit here this week, especially on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So it's been a bit, and it's pulled back a bit, but that's fine. Still sitting mid-range for the last year. Nothing exciting. Here's the here's the euro dollar, which is the inverse of the dollar index. Obviously had the 13 sell signal at the high back at the end of the year, pulled back, hit the static trend line. That's the perfect example of what the seeker does for us. You get that 13, you're supposed to pull back to the red line. We hit it exactly. Can't get much better than that. And then now we're still the opposite of the dollar index, back up to mid-range. Pound dollar obviously higher too, and not a lot here. We had the 13 sell signal there, which is a little less of a signal just because look at the count; it's pretty flat, right? So we did get a brief pullback there, and now we're up against the risk line of that, but that wasn't nearly as interesting of a signal as the other one. By the way, if you're ever trying to compare what a seeker signal looks like, here's a good one, right? Because you get the big move up. Here's a bad one because you get a flat move to get to the signal, right? You take the ones that get the big move up more seriously. Here's the ES. This is the S&P futures, S&P 500 futures contract. New highs again today. Obviously, economy super strong. Job numbers look good. Everything's solid at the moment. The interest rate situation is the big question mark because it's hard to start lowering rates when the economy is so strong, even if inflation is not quite as bad now, but this is just they're in a bad bind right now, I think, from that perspective. But having said that, we're up 1,000 points on the S&P in the last 4.5 months, and that's a pretty big number. That's 25% in 4 months. So, all-time high, strongest economy ever is what it is. Here's the S&P cash index. We got a 13 sell signal in this, and we haven't broken the risk line yet, so that signal is still valid. And like we said, when you get those type of extensions, technically speaking, and this one's a decent one, and usually when you get two back-to-back, which we did have one in December, and it led to a pause for about a month, but it didn't really lead to a pullback. And if you get another one right behind that, that second one usually works. So, that 47.40 red line is kind of in play at this point in time, but we'll see what happens. NASDAQ 100, again, made new highs at one point today. But, the way it typically works is the market's usually up ahead of the State of the Union and then down afterwards. And that's basically what we got. Nothing exciting there. Russell 2000 finally made new highs for the year. Here's a look at Bitcoin. So new highs here. Hit 70,000 this week briefly for a split second. But still sitting at 68,000. TLT, the 20-year bond ETF, dead flat for the whole week. Nothing going on there at all. The VIX closes at 14.78 because we did decline on Friday. Love to see this thing get back up to 18, 19. That's when the market gets more exciting. Anything above that. Advanced decline ratio just played both ways. There's no extreme days this week. Wasn't super exciting. The trend, a lot of low trend readings, closes at 0.81. 10-day moving average is 0.96. We're not under the blue line. That's the orange line is the moving average. We're not under the blue line, which is 0.85. If you get under that, you get a sell signal on the broad market, but it is what it is. Here's the ES front month futures contract. This is the daily chart in 10-minute candles. So you can see the whole week. You can see the prior Friday way off to the left. Dead flat opening Monday, dead flat day. Basically closed unchanged. Tuesday gapped down and pushed lower, and then recovered very late a little bit. Wednesday gapped up, didn't fill the gap, closed where we opened. Thursday gapped up, drifted higher. So at this point, you're pretty much up a couple points for the week. And then Friday, a small gap up, pushed higher. Got the 13 sell signal, pulled back, and when you add it all up and you go back to look at the prior Friday's close, we're basically down 10 points for the week on the S&P, so it's not very exciting. NASDAQ 100, a little less interesting, a little more down for the week, but still not much. Let's look at the major stuff. So Apple, again, not much here, trying to curl up off the lows after the beating it's kind of taken. I mean, this thing's down, a good 18% since the highs. Amazon still hanging near the highs. Meta also hanging near the highs, but getting near a 13 sell signal. Google also trying to curl up after declining from the highs. Goldman Sachs, this thing's been untradeable since December. I mean, look how flat that is. That's just, Netflix still hanging near the highs. Tesla now down near the lows and not looking pretty at all, by the way. If you break the lows here, you're in trouble on that chart. NVIDIA, this is the one that's run like crazy and carried the market. Gap up on every day this week, and then on the gap up on Friday, sold off. Big engulfing candle, that's a negative. It does not look good at all for NVIDIA from that perspective. You usually get big candles like that. That's a thing, right? So you can't just blow that off. But that is a very, very toppy looking chart at that point, and we don't have a 13 sell signal yet. But we do have a static trend line back at 616.50, so we'll see what happens there. Zoom, mid-range for the year, and First Solar, pretty much flat at this point in time. So that's what we're looking at. Not anything super exciting. Again, we're heading into, now that we've got the futures contract roll, we're heading into options expiration, triple expiration for March, and we'll see what that brings us in terms of economic data coming out this week. Let's take a quick look. I'm just going to cover the U.S. stuff. So on Monday, by the way, we have the time change here in the U.S. Just be aware of that. So that's going to shift everybody by an hour this weekend for Forex and all that other stuff, futures and everything. So, but Monday, no data here in the U.S. at all. Tuesday, we've got the CPI number. That's a big one, obviously. That's the inflation number. That's what everybody's been watching lately for guidance on what the Fed's going to do. You got the 10-year bond auction at 1, the federal budget balance at 2. Also before the market at 6 a.m. Eastern time, which is super early. NFIB Small Business Index. On Wednesday, not much. Crude oil inventories at 10:30, 30-year bond auction at 1. On Friday, we've got the PPI and retail sales and the weekly initial and continuing jobless claims numbers at 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Business inventories at 10, natty gas at 10:30. And on Friday, we got import-export prices an hour before the bell, along with the Empire State Manufacturing Index, capacity utilization and industrial production at 10:15, and preliminary University of Michigan sentiment at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. So not a heavy week, but that CPI number is definitely going to be a factor. And again, the bigger focus is on whether we get an options unraveling move, which is usually the easier trading day, on Wednesday, maybe Thursday in theory, and I would expect Friday for triple expiration itself once they've killed off all those options to be a bust and not much to deal with. Charts as usual brought to you by NinjaTrader. If you've not yet taken a trial of our services, feel free to do so. We will help you out for a couple of weeks. Have a great trading week.